This is the reply I received from the Department of Works and Pensions in May. Thank you for your recent correspondence about reforms to housing benefit. The Prime Minister receives a large volume of correspondence, and he is unable to reply personally on every occasion, and I have been asked to respond. Local authority staff are responsible for assessing help with rent, and they can explain the effects of the changes. They can make discretionary housing payments in some circumstances to people whose benefits fall short of their rents. Payment is at the discretion of the local authority. People who live in the social rented sector have generally had their rents met in full from housing benefit. Their entitlement was previously not affected by whether or not they under-occupied their homes. However, this was no longer considered sustainable, and housing benefit for working age tenants in the social rented sector is now being restricted. These restrictions apply where people live in a property that is too large for their needs. The Coalition inherited a housing benefit bill that had spiralled out of control. Without immediate reform, it would have exceeded $25 billion by 2015. Ministers felt it essential to act quickly to bring it under control. However, as well as helping to contain growing housing benefit expenditure, this change should encourage mobility within the social rented sector, strengthen work incentives, and make better use of the available social housing. Ministers believe that we need to do everything possible to improve the way we use our social housing stock. There are widespread mismatches between household sizes and the size of accommodation. Benefits were subsidising nearly 1 million extra bedrooms for people under-occupying their accommodation. This at a time when there were also over 250,000 households living in overcrowded conditions in the social renting sector, as well as 1.8 million households on the waiting list for social housing. In England alone, ministers want to encourage social landlords to make the best use of their housing stock. The new arrangements work through deductions from the eligible components of the tenant's actual rent. There is a 14% reduction for those with one extra bedroom and a 25% reduction for those with 2 or more extra bedrooms. It's estimated that approximately 1 in 5 tenants living in the social rented sector and in receipt of housing benefit are affected by the change. Over 80% of those affected will be under-occupying their home by just 1 bedroom and are likely to have an average reduction in housing benefit of £12 a week. When working out the size of the property for housing benefit purposes, the criteria take account of the number of people who occupy the dwelling as their home, their ages, and the composition of the household. These size criteria provide for a bedroom for a couple, a single person aged 16 or over, 2 children of the same sex under the age of 16, 2 children of the same or opposite sexes under the age of 10, and a sole or remaining child. Changes in the household makeup will take immediate effect, except where a relative living in the home dies. In these cases, legislation allows a 12-month period where the rent is met in full or continues to be met at the previous level. With regard to the availability of social housing, Ministers have a comprehensive strategy in place to increase the numbers of new homes for rent. The government is investing more funding in this, including a £10 billion debt guarantee scheme to support delivery of new homes purpose-built for private rent and for affordable additional housing. This is on top of the existing £4.5 billion investment in new affordable homes in the period to 2015. The strategy will help deliver up to 170,000 affordable homes by 2015 for rent and affordable ownership. 48,000 affordable homes were completed in the period 2011 to 2012. Throughout the discussions on the Welfare Reform Act, Ministers referred to the need to avoid introducing overly complex rules. However, they looked very carefully at the feasibility of developing specific exemptions that were suggested for a variety of groups. On the 12th of March, Ian Duncan Smith announced the intention to lay amending regulations to clarify the size criteria rules for two specific groups. First, people who are approved foster carers will be allowed an additional room whether or not a child has been placed with them or they are between placements, as long as they have fostered a child or have become an approved foster carer in the last 12 months. Second, the size criteria rules will not be applied to a room normally occupied by a member of the armed forces, provided they intend to return home. Ministers have agreed improved arrangements through these regulations which put these protections beyond doubt. These two changes will apply to tenants in both the social and the private rented sectors. Current case law for those living in the private rented sector allows claimants one extra bedroom where their child's disability means they are unable to share with another child. This will also be the case in the social rented sector. As with all housing benefit claims, the determination as to whether disability requires people to have an extra bedroom is a matter for the local authority to decide. With the help of guidance issued by this department, it is important to note that the allocation is only in relation to the extra bedroom that is required and not in relation to any further spare bedrooms claimants may have. Ministers are aware of the impact that the changes may have on some other groups. That is why they announced that they would add an additional 25 million to the DHP budget from 2013 to 2014. This department has issued guidelines to local authorities emphasising that DHPs remain available for other priority groups, including those people whose homes have had significant disability adaptations. This comes on top of the £190 million already set aside over the spending review period to help local authorities implement the housing benefit reforms, which includes an extra £130 million for DHPs. Local decision makers are better placed to make informed judgments about the relative priorities and the needs to target limited resources more effectively. The measures will be monitored and evaluated over a 2-year period. Initial findings will be available in 2014, and the final report in late 2015. The evaluation will include small-scale, independent primary research with a range of local authorities, social landlords and voluntary organisations. As part of the research, officials will look at supply issues, rural factors and people unable to share rooms. Where possible, it will also consider people's financial circumstances, social networks and family life. During 2011 and 2012, ministers brought in reforms to the housing benefit payments in the private rented sector. There were a great number of negative predictions before the introduction of the local housing allowance reforms. It was claimed that 42% of landlords would scale back rentals to the housing benefit claimants. It was claimed that 134,000 people would have to move home or become homeless. However, these fears have not come to pass. The housing benefit caseload has risen by over 5% since the reforms were introduced in 2012. The number of households in temporary accommodation has risen by just 900 in London, and across the country the numbers of family accepted as homeless is still less than half the level reached in the mid-2000s. Therefore, our experience suggests that landlords and tenants are adapting to the housing benefit reforms.